In the pantheon of heavy metal icons, there is arguably no one more iconic than the man they call the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne. A founding member of Black Sabbath, the band many attribute with the creation of the heavy metal genre, Ozzy helped to define a sound that would change the musical landscape of rock forever. As the frontman of the seminal heavy metal band, Ozzy's high-pitched vocals meshed with guitarist Tony Iommi's down-tuned tritones to catapult Black Sabbath into massive success throughout the 1970s. During this period, Ozzy and the rest of the band, for that matter, were avid drug users, which created a toxic environment that led to the firing of Ozzy in 1979. Not long after this firing, Ozzy began working on his solo career, which led to the formation of a new band with notable member Randy Rhoads, a guitar savant, called Wizard of Oz. The band's first album was under the same name, but credited to Ozzy alone, which marked the beginning of an illustrious solo career. In this video, I will discuss the first album from the dismissal of Ozzy from Sabbath to the aftermath and impact of this album in the grand scheme of heavy metal history. In 1976, Black Sabbath began working on an album titled Technical Ecstasy, where they began to depart from the doomy and ominous sound that made them so popular. It was during this time that Ozzy began to contemplate leaving the band for the first time to work with other musicians. The album released to less than savory reviews and was Sabbath's second album in a row to not reach platinum. While working on the next album, Never Say Die, Ozzy once again began toying with the idea of leaving Black Sabbath, and this time he did something about it. From late 1977 until January of 1978, Ozzy had quit Sabbath to attempt to start his own band. Just as this band was about to start rehearsals, Ozzy had a change of heart and rejoined Sabbath days before they were supposed to record the album that he left from. Ozzy's change of heart made the recording process even more difficult for Black Sabbath because he refused to sing any of the songs the band had written with the replacement singer David Walker. Between rampant drug use and the creative strain created by having to essentially start over the album from scratch, the album that was released was panned as unfocused and frankly not very good. The resulting tour was one of the final nails in the coffin for the Ozzy Osbourne era of Black Sabbath. For the tour, Black Sabbath had Van Halen open for them, which emphasized how uninspired the band had become. The youthful energy brought by Eddie Van Halen and the rest of the Los Angeles band was in stark contrast to the tired and drugged-up members of Black Sabbath. After this disappointing tour, Osbourne and the rest of the band rented a house in Bel Air, California, to work on their next album, and this is where the fissures truly began to show. Everyone in the band was consuming copious amounts of drugs and alcohol, but Tony Iommi insists that Ozzy was on a different level. Ozzy refutes this, saying that he didn't use any more or any less than any other member of the band, but either way, tensions began to rise between the vocalist and the guitarist. Iommi says that Ozzy showed a complete lack of interest in recording and doing the work, and Ozzy claims he was forced to re-record his vocals over and over again for tracks that were being overproduced by Iommi. Finally, by Iommi's order, but with the support of the other band members, Ozzy was fired from Black Sabbath. This was the culmination of nearly a decade of an often contentious relationship between Iommi and Osbourne that saw many instances of Iommi knocking out Ozzy when his drunkenness became too much to handle. Now it was time for Ozzy to finally pursue that solo career he had been flirting with for the past few years. While the band's manager, Don Arden, was trying to get Ozzy to come back to Sabbath to continue what he saw as their most profitable lineup, the rest of the band hired another icon of heavy metal to be their new vocalist. Ronnie James Dio of the band Rainbow was hired and officially marked the end of the Ozzy era of Sabbath, as he fundamentally shifted their sound to something different. After this hiring, Arden then signed Ozzy himself to Jet Records as a solo act. To protect his new investment, Arden sent his daughter, Sharon, Ozzy's later wife, to provide for Ozzy's needs as he was in a pretty dark place after the firing. Ozzy is quoted, "I'd got £96,000 for my share of the name, so I just locked myself away and spent 3 months doing coke and booze." Sharon wanted him to start a supergroup with Gary Moore, a Northern Irish guitarist, and Don wanted him to name his band Son of Sabbath, which Ozzy despised. Ozzy ended up doing neither of these things and began holding auditions in Los Angeles to form his band. A few days before Ozzy had to return to England, a short and scrawny 23-year-old showed up with a Les Paul and a practice amp and began warming up. An inebriated Ozzy was mystified and swears that he offered him a job on the spot, but his mental state and other reporting suggested it was a day or so later. This guitarist was a man named Randy Rhoads, whose playing would come to define Ozzy's earliest solo work. Rhoads was born in Santa Monica, California to a musical family. His mother, who raised him and his two siblings alone after his father left when he was 2, was a professional piano player with a music degree from UCLA. She ran a music school where Rhoads took folk and classical guitar lessons in addition to piano lessons with his mother. He eventually learned rock guitar and picked it up quickly enough that his teacher had to stop instructing him because Rhoads' knowledge began to exceed his own. Randy and his brother attended an Alice Cooper concert in 1971 that was a defining moment in the young guitarist's career. Later, his brother said Randy was mesmerized. He was catatonic, just staring at the stage. Later that night, Randy said, "I can do this. I can look like this. I can be this." Afterwards, he formed the band Quiet Riot with his best friend from middle school, Kelly Garney. The band saw decent local success in LA and had 2 albums released in Japan, but eventually tensions started to rise when Garney attempted to shoot the lead singer Kevin Dubrow, forcing Rhoads to fire his friend. This was when Rhoads decided to audition for Ozzy Osbourne and took him up on his offer after being disillusioned with the turmoil of Quiet Riot and the band's inability to sign an American record deal. Rhoads' departure effectively ended the band until Dubrow revived it in 1982, and they would eventually release the first metal album to top the Billboard charts with Metal Health. When Ozzy returned to England, he was introduced to Bob Daisley, the former bassist of Rainbow, the same band that Black Sabbath hired Ronnie James Dio from to replace Ozzy. They started working together, and although the management wanted to keep Ozzy's new band British, they brought over Randy Rhoads to play with them, and Randy stayed with Ozzy in his home. These 3 then went to Wales to start working on the album that would be known as Blizzard of Oz. This is where they recorded demos for 3 of the songs: I Don't Know, Crazy Train, and Goodbye to Romance. I Don't Know and Crazy Train would go on to be Ozzy's 2 most performed songs in his career. After getting back from Wales, the band started auditioning drummers, and they eventually settled on Lee Kerslake of the band Uriah Heep. Now the band that was going by the name Blizzard of Oz was complete and ready to record. Much of the writing and composition was done by Rhoads and Daisley, although all 4 members are given songwriting credits on the album. Rhoads in particular shined due to the creative freedom he was permitted with Ozzy and Daisley that he didn't have while in Quiet Riot. His background in classical music influenced him heavily in this album and helped to spawn a new genre of guitar playing referred to as neoclassical metal that draws influence from classical music and the fast technical playing of new wave of British heavy metal guitarists. Rhoads' playing on Crazy Train was compared favorably to that of Ritchie Blackmore of Deep Purple. When the magazine Guitar World asked its readers what the greatest guitar solos of all time were, Rhoads' work on Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley were voted 9th and 28th. Ozzy would later recount how Rhoads wanted to subvert some of the standards of heavy metal music by trying to have every song on an album be in a different key to create a more diverse sound. Rhoads also wrote the acoustic instrumental on the album D as a tribute to his mother. Other songs on the album included No Bone Movies, a song written by Daisley about a disdain of porn movies, and was added to give Kerslake a writing credit on the album. Goodbye to Romance, which Ozzy saw as a farewell to Black Sabbath, and Revelation, Mother Earth, which is about damage done to the climate, told through biblical references. Finally, the song Suicide Solution caused controversy when a family in 1984 alleged that their 19-year-old son had listened to the song immediately before shooting himself and held Osbourne responsible for encouraging the behavior. Ozzy and Daisley insisted that the song did not encourage suicide, but was rather a reflection on substance abuse. Osbourne had penned the line, "Wine is fine, but whiskey is quicker," with thoughts of AC/DC singer Bon Scott's alcohol-related death on his mind, and Daisley said that he was thinking of Osbourne's own substance abuse while writing. The case was dismissed and the court upheld Osbourne's First Amendment right. When the album was released, it caused some controversy in the band, as they thought it would be credited to Blizzard of Oz the band, with Ozzy's name written smaller like on the singles. Instead, the design of the album cover had Ozzy's name much larger and made it appear like it was an Ozzy Osbourne album called Blizzard of Oz. The optic that they were now a backing band for Ozzy was reinforced when they performed at the Reading Festival and were billed as Ozzy's new band. This rubbed the band members the wrong way, especially Rhoads, as he felt him and Daisley did most of the heavy lifting and didn't want to just be a backing band for a lesser contributor. Many of these issues would come up again when the band was recording the follow-up album Diary of a Madman in 1981. At this point, Don Arden's daughter Sharon had become the band's manager, and she was already dissatisfied with the level of creative input that the non-Ozzy members of the band had on Blizzard of Oz. So when Daisley and Kerslake, who had contributed heavily to the writing of the follow-up, approached her about a lack of money to live on during the recording, they were fired and replaced without credit. When the firing occurred, Rhoads nearly left with them, but Daisley and Kerslake convinced him to stay. But he had no more allies to fight against the act, becoming Ozzy Osbourne instead of Wizard of Oz. Even though he didn't end up leaving, Rhoads had planned to leave the band after the tour of Diary of a Madman to pursue a degree in classical guitar from his mother's alma mater, UCLA. Tragically, while the band was traveling to Orlando, Florida, Rhoads was flying in a small passenger plane to get some aerial pictures with his camera when the pilot decided to try and buzz the tour bus to mess with the people sleeping inside. When he went for the maneuver, the pilot clipped the wing of the plane on the bus, and the plane went out of control before crashing into a mansion. Rhoads and the other two passengers were killed instantly. The death of Rhoads reverberated throughout the rock world and signaled an end to an era of Ozzy's solo career. Wizard of Oz was Ozzy's very successful attempt to revive his career after being forced out of Black Sabbath. Through collaboration with some of the best musical minds of the period, notably Randy Rhoads, he was able to create a sound distinct from Black Sabbath that would go on to influence countless metal acts throughout the 1980s. The album is also responsible for launching the career of Rhoads himself and let him serve as a blueprint for the many guitarists who would name him as an inspiration, like Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine, Dimebag Darrell of Pantera, and even his replacement in Ozzy's band after his death, Zakk Wylde. Probably the best description of this album is given by actor Jack Black at Ozzy's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 2024. Quote, I took that record home, and when the needle hit the vinyl, heaven opened up above me.